As we have seen so far in our reading of 1 John, John writes in quite short sentences, simple statements that push his thought forward bit by bit. But though apparently simple, what he says is actually quite dense and at times mind-boggling. It's also not easy always to split up his chunks of thought or argument. Thus, what he is saying at the start of chapter 3 needs to be traced at least one or two sentences back into chapter 2. In 2:28, he mentions the return of Christ, which he will develop in 3:2. And in 2:29, he says that as Jesus is righteous, anyone who is righteous has certainly been born of him. John will expand on this in 3:4-10, even repeating it, but in reverse order, in verse 7. But first of all, John marvels at the fact that we are called children of God, and he affirms that that is what we are. He is trying to assure his readers of this fact. In fact, the relationship is so real and sure that John can say that the reason the world does not know us is because it does not know him. However, when Jesus does return, there will be something new about our identity. All we can know is that whatever Jesus is, when he is revealed, we shall be like him. But what does John mean? There must be some final perfection of a likeness which is growing in us now as disciples that will occur at the point of meeting him on his return. John is not strictly talking about the individual experience of a believer who might die soon and go to be with Christ. He is talking about Jesus' return and the consummation of all things. It is at this moment when all will be revealed, including our own nature. The important thing is the behavior. That is why he goes on to say that because of this hope, we purify ourselves, because he is pure. It is the brilliance of a perfected, pure character or soul that is the great mystery. John is not hinting that we might be a foot taller when we are transformed, but the nature of what it means to be purified, to be as God originally intended for us. And we will know what that is when we see him, and we will have that likeness. But the opposite is also true. Those who sin reveal a dark likeness and a diabolical paternity. John makes this point so that his readers might not be deceived. But what kind of deception? Is it the kind that Jesus spoke of in Matthew 7, where his disciples must be on their guard against the wolves in sheep's clothing? By their fruit you will know them, Jesus warned. Or is it a kind of deception whereby false teachers have been saying that there is now no law and it is not possible to sin anymore? Paul combated this view in Romans, as there were some who said, if grace is more than sin, let us sin so that we can have more grace. Or perhaps it was another philosophy or mysticism altogether, which valued spiritual insight, revelation, or visions over any matters of the flesh. In short, it doesn't matter what you do with your body. All that matters is that you are spiritually on another plane. Not so, because we are to love one another, and to not love one another is to become murderers of each other. This teaching harkens back again to the Sermon on the Mount, in chapter 5 this time, where Jesus shows how hating people is the pathway to murder. On the contrary, instead of killing each other, we ought to lay down our lives for each other. Indeed, as he writes in verse 16, Jesus' actions in doing so for us is the very definition of love. The following verse takes it down a notch and points out that simply sharing our goods with our brothers and sisters is evidence that God's love is in us. The way John puts it is very reminiscent of the letter of James. Living this way is what gives us assurance that whenever our hearts condemn us, we are of the truth. We seek to obey his commandments because we abide in him and he abides in us. Not that we are trying to abide in him, but because that is already the case. His commandment is twofold: believe in the name of God's Son Jesus and love one another. This belief with these actions show that he abides in us by his Spirit.